Pallavi, hi, good to have you with us. How have you been?
Good, Ashu. How are you today?
I'm doing well, Pallavi. It's good to have you. We've just gotten out of International Women's Day, right? And there was, this is like a perfect conversation, right?
Yeah.
With you at the back of Women's Day, right? And I think most importantly, you represent a large family-run business, right? And unfortunately in India, we don't see a lot of this, right? I think there's a narrative
Especially
change
in
which
the manufacturing space.
especially in manufacturing space, right? And I think I personally believe that the narrative needs to change, right? We need more and more women to come in and be part of, businesses, right? I think because there's a very different sensitivity that they bring to the table, right?
I agree.
The consumer base is changing. It's becoming a lot more sensitive. It's becoming a lot more aware, right? And I think women are, my sense is, better cut to handle that sensitivity and sensibility that the newer age consumer is going to require, right? And I think it becomes an important conversation in that context, right? But before we do that, Pallavi, right, I'd love you to, give us a quick round of an introduction, right, of who you are and what are the pieces that you're putting together and taking care of at SPPL. And of course, we're going to dive deeper into the SPPL story, right? And some of the specific aspects that you're kind of doing on the business front of it through the course of conversation. But a quick round of introduction will be helpful.
Sure. So, as you know, my name is Pallavi, and I am a chartered accountant by profession. I used to work with KPMG before I joined SPPL, before I got married, and I was into tax and regulatory services. And post that, when I joined SPPL, we started the e-commerce space. And at present, I hold a role which says senior vice president, which entitles me to a lot of mixed roles here in the company. It's not like I'm doing one specific job. I'm like at home, I also multitask over here. So I look into the finance, I look into the marketing, I look into after sales, I look into a lot of stuff at the moment. It's all a mix, but it's an interesting mix that happens for me.
Super. And I think you're possibly, a large ship and you're trying to change course, right? With so many responsibilities with you. Pallavi, my first question in this conversation, right? Now, SPPL is a classical SME, MSME. It qualifies within that bracket, right? As per, the laws within the country, right? Now, I'd love to understand the construct of SPPL, right? You're largely into televisions, and I mean, you've been in the right good industry, right? I'd love to understand the construct of what SPPL stands for. You represent many brands, and brands like Thomson, Kodak, right? And you like the back end and the backbone for a lot of these brands for the India operation, right? I'd love to understand the construct of SPPL, and some of the brands that you represent in India, including your in-house brands, right? That you've been running for some time. So I'd love to understand the portfolio construct of the brand.
All right. So, one small thing that I like to tell you that we no longer qualify as SME or MSMEs anymore because of the capacity that we run at the moment. We license a lot of brands in India, and not just for televisions, but for other appliances as well. We're just starting out with a new section in Thomson, and we license televisions for Westinghouse, for Kodak, for Blowpong, for Thomson in India. These brands are primarily, of course, not based out of India. They're all out of various parts of the country, some in the US, some in Europe. And they all run on a license-based program wherein I run a 360-degree operations for the brand in India, wherein I manufacture here, I market here, I do the social media here, I do the after sales here, I do all back-end support over here. And the brand basically just lends us their name, and we're supposed to obviously make it big and make it happen, because if we don't, it's not going to run it. So,
Interesting. How's the post 2020 environment been, right? Because possibly the job that you've kind of the responsibility that you've kind of undertook, right? My sense is I think there was a large operations that used to exist, large distribution that used to exist in an offline setting, right? And 2020 has been an unreal year, right? It's brought us to consume online, right? I think that's the new narrative which has been set in, and this is not a tendency that we are, this is a tier A tendency, right? I think this is the tendency that we're looking at pretty much across the country, right? Even tier 2, for example, has now moved online, right? Kids who are outside are now kind of ordering for their parents, or even people in the tier 2 parts of the country, right, are now pretty much ordering online, and the content has kind of come in as a huge filler, right? It's just made us aspire at a very different level, right? As a country, we've just like overnight we switched, right, from the arbitrage that existed. How's that been for you?
So honestly, I've always been like an online consumer. So I was very happy to see this shift. I was like, I'm not a person to actually venture out and look into shops. I was very happy sitting at home ordering online. But
Right.
I've seen this huge shift that happened for us in 2020 and then more towards 2021, where consumers who were very wary of buying products offline, especially big size televisions, people want to go, want to experience it, and then want to buy the product. But the online market space has given them the comfort that they can order the product, use it for say another 5, 7, 10 days, and if they don't like it, they have an option to reach out to us as well or return it back to the platform. So I think that gives them the comfort of not being able to venture out and buy it offline. And with time, it has become more of a habit than a necessity now, because as we know, the COVID situation in India is better and stores are opening. But somehow I feel like the modern retail has taken a big hit because of this pandemic, and a lot of stores have shut down. We personally also run quite a few branches across India, but we've seen a loss of sales happen on the storefront as compared to the online front. We see more sales happening there. So, I mean, like it's a win. It's not a win-win either ways always. So I mean, like it's okay that it's happening that ways, and we are adjusting to that now. We are using our storefronts for other purposes and also trying to develop them. It's not like we've shut them down. We're also trying to develop the modern retail front, which was fairly good for us in the year 2020 before the pandemic. But unfortunately, at the moment, a lot of stores, like I said, have shut down, and that has led to the modern retail front becoming a lesser part of our business at the moment.
So Pallavi, we're going to talk more about that, right? Because I think now brands will have to have a very different strategy, right, when it comes to experiential as a whole, right? And I think that to me, I think is also a massive opportunity, right? I think that's going to distinguish between, say, a player A, which has a complete online strategy, and a player B, which is essentially kind of moving hybrid, right? I think experiences are going to be important, but we'll cover that point in just a bit, right? But before I do that, right, one thing that I want to understand, Pallavi, is essentially a lot of brands that you represent, right, are essentially brands which have been legacy brands, right? So, for example, Thomson has been a legacy brand, Kodak has been a legacy brand, right? Now, these are brands that did not necessarily start out as, say, television brands, right? And essentially what you were doing is you're representing them for television businesses, right? Now, when I am online, right, and I have all the choices in front of me, it's a difficult one, right? And eventually it boils down to just a price arbitrage between, say, a brand A and a brand B, right?
Yes.
Now,
agree.
And that essentially means that you're operating in a very commoditized zone, right? Your ability to upprice your product is very, very limited, right? And that essentially means that your backend will always be under tremendous amount of stress, because you'll always be trying to sort of squeeze in cost, right? Which could mean a very different kind of quality, which could mean a very different kind of experience once the consumer buys it, right? Possibly leading into more returns. It's a complex equation. How do you look at it, right? I mean, you're at the forefront of it. You're handling it. And like I said, a lot of these brands are not necessarily TV brands, right? You're leveraging the brand that they've created into selling these items, right? What's your thesis on this front, right? And do you agree it's getting into a commoditized zone? What are possibly some things that you could do or are part of your, say, the plan going forward, right? Where you get the flexibility to upprice your product. I'd love to understand that construct and some of these nuances that are there in the as you build the brand.
So, I come from a place where I run a brand online and offline as well. I have brands which run purely online, which like Thomson and Westinghouse, which are purely online brands, and White Westinghouse. And like Westinghouse is is a brand with a legacy for television. So we leverage that to run it on Amazon. Similarly, Thomson also as a brand has a legacy for televisions and also is a well-known brand when it comes to electronic appliances, which is why we leverage that and are running that purely online. But when it comes to Kodak, which was like a brand which was not known for televisions, not known for any kind of other appliances, and we are running majorly into televisions only at the moment, and I run that brand online and offline. So we always have to be aware of the pricing that we keep, and we always have to be careful about what we price it online, what we price it offline. It shouldn't cannibalize our marketplaces. It shouldn't cannibalize each other. And we try and differentiate between the models, we try and differentiate between the features, we try and differentiate between the look and feel of the televisions. We also, that is why we segregate some platforms. So
Right.
there's a lot of thought and mix that goes into it. And of course,
Right.
there's a social media strategies for both the, all the brands have to be different. So it's like a constant process that keeps on happening, and constant back and forth as to how to keep the brand up and running, how to earn out of the brand.
Right.
It's kind of difficult in today's day and age, especially in the e-commerce space where people might think they're huge margin, but they're not.
Right.
And we're constantly competing to come at a price point which is user friendly and also settles with us.
Right.
So it's not like a brand can only sell online and sustain. And at the moment, there are brands which are sustaining. I am running those brands, but I might have to adopt different strategies from for them down the line. Given if I don't earn enough,
Mhm.
if I feel like their potential is not being tapped into, I might
Sure.
expand that marketplace.
Very interesting. Uh, Pallavi, e-commerce is a challenging environment, right? And I think a lot of what you're doing is, like I said, right, is getting commoditized, right? Because a very small differential in pricing could mean that a loss of business, right, and loss of
Yeah.
this thing, right? The other very very challenging environment, right, that I think any player has to deal with, and I think it becomes all the more complicated in your case, right, is returns. Right. I would love to ask you that question, but before I do that, I'd love to understand what's the regional spread of the brand, right? So across your online and offline businesses, how are you spread across, right? So where are most of the sales coming from, right? Is this a tier A market phenomenon where you've been able to build some very strong inroads, or are you seeing some surprising traction from tier 2 and tier 3, right? Which I think is been phenomenal, right? I've spoken with many players in the D2C category, for example, right? And they've been surprised and overwhelmed with the traction that they're seeing in from a tier 2 India. Right. Is that the case with you as well? I'd love to understand, the penchant to buy, right? Where is it coming from? Where is the traction coming from in your case?
So, thanks to the digitalization of India and the internet being widely available with everybody, we do see a lot of traction coming from tier two cities and tier two areas as well. In fact,
Sure.
some might come from tier three as well. Given the fact that all our televisions are priced at extremely affordable rates, and they're meant to be for mass reach, we're happy to see that traction coming from a tier two or a three city. And having said that, we have brands which have sustained for over the period of time and have now moved on from tier 2 and tier 3 to tier 1 as well. So it's not like it's only tier 2 or only tier 3 or only tier 1. It's always a mix of all three.
Right.
And especially for brands which are available offline, you will see a mix for them coming, which is a better mix than just an online market brand, because it all said and done, all pin codes are not deliverable when it comes to an online marketplace.
Right.
So we're always at a loss for that. But of course, having said that, the online marketplaces are constantly improving on that and constantly increasing their pin codes. And you'll be surprised that at present Amazon delivers to almost 16 to 18,000 pin codes. So
Right.
kudos. I mean, even if I wanted to, I couldn't open that kind of retail space.
Pallavi, fun question, right? Which is that one pin code that kind of completely, you were kind of like flabbergasted, right? If I can use that word, that you had an order from, right? And you, I mean, you kind of service that, right? What is that one pin code which did
I
that for you?
couldn't pinpoint a pin code, but I can tell you like an area. Like when we started out any brand, we see a lot of traction from the south of India,
Right.
and primarily areas like Hyderabad, Chennai, Tamil Nadu. Somehow, traction for the brands from those places are always good. People, I believe, are more tech savvy in that area, so it's always easier to market to them
Right.
as opposed to somebody in North India.
Interesting. Interesting. I have a question on that, and I'm gonna just come to that in just a bit, right? But before we do that, I would love to talk to you about a little about returns, right? Now, electronics have their own complexities, right? Handling, for example, it becomes fun, right? Serviceability, again, like I said, is a huge issue, right? Warehousing is another big problem, right? So it's a fairly complex one, right? Vis-a-vis many other, say, products that are flying very well, say in a D2C category, right? With electronics, it's a challenge, right? How is that playing out for you? how are the returns doing it for you? Because that's a huge
So because
resource in that
like you said, the returns are a huge part of this business, and we're constantly tapping into and constantly looking into the return rate, looking into the reasons of return, trying to understand what the consumer comes from, what more we could give to the consumer so that it doesn't get converted into a return. It's a
right.
constant process. It's not like we can set parameters and decide that
Sure.
okay, today's the day after which no returns will come. That will never
Right.
happen.
Sure.
We can we can try and give our best, but we may not always satisfy all types and all ages of consumers. So which is why it's something that we work on constantly with our service partners as well, and we try and see what more value add we can give to the consumer when it comes to purchasing a television, especially online, so that it doesn't convert into a return.
But tell me this, right? So vis-a-vis industry standards, right? How are you guys doing it better, right? I mean, I think one thing that has become very clear through the course of conversation is that you're kind of dissecting pretty much every single aspect of the supply chain, right? And I think online is something which is becoming a very core part of your strategy. And going forward, it's possibly going to be a significant contributor to the overall sense, right? How are you doing on returns vis-a-vis industry standards? That's one.
We're doing fairly well. I mean, it's we're I think we're at par with industry standards. I mean, if I may say so, might be less also because we have, like I said, we have our own branches and we have service partners as well. So we have that leeway of always getting a direct input from an engineer as to what a consumer might want more. Say if I mean, I can actually just pick up the phone, call an engineer on my own, ask him what was the issue, why did it happen, and what more can it be done. So we also have these activities that we keep on doing. We also have feedback. I mean, I'm sure all brands do this, but a lot of we call a lot of consumers, ask them if you've got the product, if they're happy with it, what more could we do. And this is a constant ongoing thing that we need to do to anyways reduce the return rate for us.
Interesting. And what has been a surprising reason of return to you, right? I mean, something that you never expected. Of course, quality becomes an issue. Expectation is, people have certain expectations, right, in terms of the build quality and all that, right? But what is that one thing that has surprised you, saying that never expected a return for this reason? What's been that?
Honestly, I've seen it all. I mean, like I couldn't pinpoint something that would be like a surprising reason. At this point, after being doing this for 7 years, I'm at a loss that what could surprise me.
Interesting. Pallavi, serviceability again is a big issue, right? And I think it contributes to the overall experience. And I think brands today, and especially in the television industry, you want it, and you want it now, right? If something goes wrong with your hardware, right? I experienced this something firsthand, and honestly speaking, it wasn't a very comfortable experience, right? My sense is, as a manufacturer, as a representative of a lot of these brands, right, the pressure on you is much higher, right? And in a transparent environment like the one we are in today, it's just so much more easier for a buyer to go online and complain, right? And possibly crib, right? And rank and rate a player and a brand, right? Which could have a detrimental effect for a longer term, right? How are you tackling that? It needs you to be very, very agile, right? And that possibly is part of the newer, evolved consumerism that we have, the phase of consumerism that we've entered, right? How are you calibrating yourself for that, right? What are, say, some of the layers that you've created, right, to ensure that the consistency of service is very sharp, very quick, and it's at a great quality, right? What are some of the things that you're doing on that front?
Okay, so like I said, we have a lot of direct storefronts and direct branches and service partners. So we do try and keep a track on them. I mean, we do keep a track on them. I have people in place doing that constantly, so that the consumer is not, doesn't suffer too much. Gets the quickest service possible. However, not everything is under our control. Sometimes things go out of hand, like especially in the pandemic period, where a lot of consumers had to wait for a long period of time for services because PIN codes were shut. So I guess the pandemic has been good to us in that way, has taught consumers some patience.
Right.
But Yeah, having said that, it's not like people want service now. If they've complained today, and they would the ideal solve would be, if you complained at 12 o'clock, the solve would come at 2. But
Right.
that doesn't happen, right? So we try and see what areas that could happen, that could be a problem area for a consumer, try and provision for the spare parts, try and provision for the service period, and try to keep the service period to a minimum so that the consumer doesn't have to go without a television for too long.
Interesting. We are a country which loves our content, right?
Yes,
I think
indeed.
television has become like the fifth member of the family, right? So and it can't go wrong. And it's a crazy one, right? Pallavi, moving on to the communication side of it, right? Now, I mean, there's an interesting fact that you said, right, which is that of South, right, in terms of how they engage with information which is there on the
Social
e-commerce
media.
platforms, the
Yeah.
e-commerce platforms, and on social media. And then they sort of build that purchase behavior, and they're very clear in terms of the expectations, right? In any case, the way I look at it, and the more I talk to people down south, right, it's a more minimalistic set of people, right, with very, very finite, defined requirements, right. Unlike the Hindi-speaking belt, right, and Hindi-speaking belt is a fairly complicated one, right. We have our regional nuances, we have our cultural baggages. It's a fairly complex one from a consumption standpoint, right. In case of TV, right, especially when you talk of say tier 2 and downwards, right, there's also there's this brag value that comes with it, right. And that's a great play from a communication standpoint, right, for you to go out and build a brand. Would love to understand how is it that you're tracking for it, right? I mean, is there a unified communication strategy that you have for pretty much all of India, or are you segmenting India depending, of course, your sales numbers, right? That you kind of segmenting it in a sharp way, where, say, for example, a communication for say UP and within UP and areas out, in and around, is going to be done in a certain format, right? And say when you talk about say the other upcoming regions, right? Say Orissa, for example, is going to be different, right? How are you cutting it? Love to understand that, right? Is this unified, homogeneous across all markets, or are you using local nuances to build that relationship better with the consumers there?
So we try and specifically promote regional content when it comes to it. And of course, like with Android TVs, the best part is content is available in all languages.
Sure.
So the customer has that comfort. Our strategy when it comes to, there's no specific strategy when it comes to the South. Is just because the market is more tech savvy. Anything that we put out there gets absorbed quicker.
Sure.
And of course, because say as an e-commerce platforms are based out of that, their reach and the knowledge of them is also bigger, which is I think which is primarily one of the biggest reasons that the South market is a big market for us.
Right.
After South, there comes West, which is also an equally big market, as in probably at number 2 after South. And the consumer over there is also equally knowledgeable, might be a different speaking than the Hindi speaking population that we have. But I don't think we can say that we need to have a strategy specifically for the South speaking population, because I think everybody is equally important, and everybody understands all languages at the end of the day, given that we live in India. So which is the best part. So I mean, there's no directed towards them, like you might call it, strategy to show them content or anything.
Interesting. Pallavi, I think no conversation today can be complete without talking about 2020, right? And 2020 has been an unreal year. Of course, while it disrupted a lot of things for all of us, right, as consumers, I think for manufacturers like yourself, and it's just been a harrowing time, right? It's been a very, very difficult time. Supply chains got disrupted massively. What I would love to understand is how is all of that now kind of shaping it? Because a lot of that is for some industries it's all coming to normal, but for some industries it's still very, very disrupted, right? We're not seeing a very consistent flow of components, right? And all of that.
So I mean, it's safe to say we're still reeling from the effects of 2020 and 2021. As you said, the supply chain did get disrupted. It's still not what I would like to call normal. We still can't expect shipments on time. The rates that we were offered pre-COVID are still not in place. The kind of the strategy that we could follow with respect to the pricing, with respect to raw material supply, with respect to shortage, or maybe an equalization of demand. We It's all gone for a toss in these past 2 years. We've not been able to actually sit down and pinpoint that, okay, this is going to happen at this point of time, which is something but we could fairly populate before COVID. But at this point of time, it's become more of a play by the ear kind of environment, wherein we should be ready for any kind of situation that's thrown at us, and which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to actually see what works best in which way, so that there is no disruption of supply at our end.
Interesting. Pallavi, how has all of this changed the say the working capital requirements, for example, right? How are you fending for that, right? Because I've had, like I said, a chance to speak with many promoters, right, and many founders. There is no very clear thesis. Everybody essentially wants this to end and things to normalize, right?
Yes.
But the coverage ratios, for example, have increased, right? They're sitting on more cash, right? Because there could be an aberration which is not necessarily factored in, and there could be a price to be paid, right? How are you dealing with this? Because on one side you have this extremely demanding consumer, right? Who wants it and now, and the supply chain is not consistent, right? The working capital requirements, like I said, is completely have gone erratic, right? How is it in your case, and how are you dealing?
So agree. I mean, the working capital requirements even for us have gone for a toss, and it took us a good 6 to 8 months to actually bring it back into flow, bring it back into the flow that we wanted at, so that we can function normally. Because all said and done, even if I have to buy raw materials, I still have to work on a day-to-day basis. I have to maintain my daily operations, right? And which is something that could have been planned, but at this point of time, instead of keeping a buffer of, say, 10%, we increase the buffer to 15, and just say that we now are trying to be prepared for what might come when, and always keep options open, so that there's no loss of working capital for us, and it keeps on flowing. As you know, it's very difficult to get money stuck in one place. We can't invest completely in raw materials or invest completely in operation. It has to be a balanced show at the end of the day.
But Pallavi, tell me this, right? So had the situation changed, for example, and this could possibly be, you could answer it in a slightly more macro manner. Has this also opened you up in terms of the source of capital, for example, right? Typically, traditional and family-run businesses have largely been, very very focused, right, in terms of, say, the banking relationship, right? They're not necessarily businesses who really gone out and liquidated equity, right? Is there now newer models that are being experimented with? Have that mindset changed? Is there a shift happening? Would have to understand.
So, like you said, we are a family-run business. It's been like that for some 25, 30 years now. And the fact that we would need to dilute equity to raise funds is not something that somebody has looked at ever. Of course, it's something that should be explored, given the fact that we might, if we want to expand further, and might need to open up new categories, open up new places to manufacture. It might be something that we need to tap into the future. At present, it's not something that's being looked at. It's something that's safe to say hasn't even been thought about by, coming from a very traditional background. It doesn't work for us. And it's always been, as like you said, we have very strong banking relationships, and that has helped us throughout this.
Interesting. Pallavi, experiential marketing is something which has become so much more important, right? And we touched upon it, we alluded to this point early on in our conversation, right? I want to specifically tackle it, with you in this conversation, right? Now, TV, for example, right? The TVs in general, right? And I think any digital device, experiential is something which is very, very important, right? And we've seen that. India is a market where touch and feel is very important. I think we still have those trust issues, right? E-commerce has solved it and kind of optimized it beautifully, especially in the last 2.5 years. Going forward, how do you see this, right? To me, the way I look at it, a lot of these experience centers, for example, have become so much more important, right? Because we have tendencies, right? We want to experience the thing before we buy, right? My sense is, going forward, the experiential activities that, for example, a lot of brands plan and have, right? And that also includes having physical footprint through these stores will play as a very strong differentiator vis-a-vis only online brands, right? I mean, we're still going to take time to converge into being a completely digital economy. What's your sense of it? How are you looking at it, right? Is there a different strategy that you have on the physical front and on the digital front, or is physical supporting digital for now, which could evolve into its own at a later point? Would love to
I
understand
would
your.
say that physical wood is supporting digital at the moment. And surprisingly, India as a digital economy is surpassing quite a few.
Sure.
And our reliability on e-commerce platforms is greater as compared to quite a few other countries. And when it comes to an experiential zone, it's an activity that a brand can do off and on, but to maintain a constant physical storefront for an experience is sort of becomes a tough at the end of the day, because there are costs involved in it. And also, especially if there's no sale point, then we the return is almost zero for us. And
Sure.
also, like I said, because with e-commerce platform, the comfort of having to return the product is there. I feel
Sure.
like the need for experiencing stuff is still less.
Mhm.
And we try and obviously give the customers as many pictures, as many videos that they can use to visualize the product before buying it. And even if, and at the end of the day, if you don't like it, they can always return it. That's the comfort that an online market space offers. As pros, if you go to a physical storefront, he'll have to go once, then he'll have to go twice to return it, and a customer might think 2 times before doing that.
Interesting. I have a similar take about online, right? My belief is, I think early on when you needed something and you knew that specific brand, it was easy for you to buy it, right? Today you have 20 other options that are there, right? You represent, for example, many of the brands that are listed on these platforms, right? And that just makes it very difficult for one to go out and buy, right? My understanding is, and this is something that we've spoken with many people around us, right? Is that because of too much of availability of, say, brands, right? And that's thickening by the day, that's expanding by the day. The decision making is getting delayed, right? And I think, and that possibly is going to mean higher cost of acquisitions. That could also mean, you know, deferred buying. That could mean very inconsistent behavior on the consumer's front, right? Unless the brand goes out and builds a very specific and a sharp engagement with these audience, right? At some level, I think that's a very complex piece which is emerging, right? And that's been our observation in the process. But we'll save that for next time, Pallavi, for a detailed discussion on that one. We're towards the end of our conversation. My second last question in this conversation: what are the next 2 years like, right? We're in very interesting times. You are spearheading a large ship. You're changing course of it being from a physical brand to largely an online brand, right? What are the next 2 years like? What are the milestones that you've set for yourself?
So we have a lot of interesting projects that we're doing, and we're at the moment trying to expand brands. We're trying to build them. We're trying to also see what other categories that we can venture out into, what can be a success in India. And given that we are still hugely reliant on a lot of foreign countries, we're also trying to see what more value add that we could do in India itself, so that we don't have to rely on outside nations anymore. So which is that's the plan as of now. We plan to also we have some interesting launches for Westinghouse in the future, for Thompson as well. So it's like it's going to be an eventful year, at least 2022 for us. Yeah.
Interesting. We've seen many D2C brands, by the way, come in, right? Boat, for example, is a phenomenal brand that is doing exceptionally well, right? And then we have,
Agree.
many such brands coming up, right? Is there an aspiration of creating brands there? You have the back end, right? It's just so much more easier for you to go for the kill, right? Are you looking at that, or are you continue to essentially just focus on the current strategy which you have, is to bring in these international brands into India and continue to represent them, right? Which is slightly more safer,
So
right?
yeah,
Which
I
is
agree. It is safer, and it's something that we might look into the future, but at the moment not. I think I have enough on my plate to actually not even think about a third
interesting.
thing. But yes, like I said, it's going to be an eventful year. We're going to see what works, what not, what more we can do to build our consumer base here in India, and makes the entity stronger.
Interesting. Exports of the cards?
Not as of now. No.
Interesting. Pallavi, my last question, right? We see very few women in family-run businesses, right? And very few women. You are here and you are leading this, right? And it's spectacular, right? In terms of the entire spectrum of things that you're kind of dealing with, right? Women have been multitaskers. I don't question that, right? I believe in that. I think we have to have many more women in workforces. I think the world is going to be a better place, right? What is that one advice that you want to give to many such stakeholders, right, who operate in family-run businesses, right, to many women who, for some reason, haven't entered that area of business, right? What is that one suggestion, advice that you want to give them, right? I'd love to understand.
I would say, I mean, like, it's not been an easy journey for me either. It's been all about establishing myself, proving myself.
Right.
But I would say and as you said, women are great multitaskers, and that should be one of the main reasons that people should encourage women and their family to enter businesses, because nobody can handle 10 things at once. And I mean, it's happened for me. So I think
Right.
it's a great value add for the business as well. And it brings about a whole new perspective for your business if you see it from a woman's point of view at the end
Sure.
of the day. We have opinion clashes between me and my husband, and what he says sometimes goes, and sometimes now what I say goes. So, well, it's at the end of the day, it's seeing the business from a different perspective and always trying to build it.
So what is that one tip that you want to give to women who are on the fence, right, who want to enter business, right, are finding it difficult?
I think they should just go for it. What's the worst that would happen? You won't work, right? I mean, like, at the end of the day, it's all about exploring the opportunity. If you have the opportunity, you should definitely tap into it. And yeah, and I mean, at the end of the day, you probably will end up doing much more, or adding so much more to the business than you think you might.
Super. So essentially, what you're saying is just be very vocal about what you think is right, should be done, and be persistent, right? I think there
Yes.
are no other hacks around it, right? Pallavi, thank you so much for doing this. It was an incredible conversation. How I wish these conversations can go on. We see a lot of women in the startup ecosystem. It's much fewer interactions that we've had, with women leaders, right? In family-run businesses. Right. The way you are changing and participating in the future of this business that has been created in the last 20 or 30 years is absolutely spectacular, phenomenal, right? I think you're trying to sort of create a very new age business for a very new age audience, right? Which is amazing, right? Because a lot of traditional businesses do not necessarily understand that the markets have shifted, right? The goalposts have shifted completely. And possibly are going to be under tremendous amount of pressure and pain if they do not realize that they need to very quickly calibrate themselves or recalibrate themselves for a very different evolved audience, right? And it's heartening to see how you're kind of cracking it, right? Like a boss. Pallavi, thank you so much for doing this. It was a pleasure to have you, and look forward to having you with us much sooner, where we have some more very specific conversations around some of the good work that you're doing.
Thank you.